We haven't even got to the pandemic, to Fauci.
We've got so
Why
much.
don't we do a little roundup on the pandemic?
Real quickly, guys.
Okay, one of the things that's very interesting, you're hearing
my guy
about...
Fauci's back getting interviews again.
Fauci's back, blowing more smoke. Anyway,
but he's in London. President Trump cut him off from the U.S. He's at the Daily Telegraph.
The big story today, I think, is what's going on in Beijing, where they've shut down the city or large portions of it. And what's very interesting, as our listeners will know, the Global Times is essentially the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. And now what they are saying that it probably came from the seafood lab, but really what happened was that seafood from Europe...
Seafood market.
Yes, seafood from Europe contaminated with the coronavirus was sent to the Beijing seafood market and started this new infection. And they imply, this is the beautiful thing, they imply that, hey, maybe it was imported food that started it in Wuhan, too. So this is just this disastrous notion that it's always someone else's fault. This is the Communist
The reason this is
Party
big news,
in its essence.
You know when the Wuhan started, how much quarantine. They have 5 or 6, I think 6 rings of these interstate highways that loop around Beijing. They call them the ring roads. And they had intense quarantine in the middle. You couldn't get into the middle of Beijing where the leaders are during the initial outbreak in Wuhan. For them to admit they've got something in Beijing, you know it's bad, right? And the question is this still the first wave? Is this what happened when they reopened the country so quickly? What is Fauci telling us?
Well, bad news for Britons as well in this interview, alongside other people around the world. Fauci saying that they're not going to return to normalcy in terms of travel until at least the end of this year. And then a buried lead in the Telegraph interview also is about the protests. And Fauci, quote, says, the bottom line is there is a risk in protesting. And of course it's concerning. We know from the experience of all of us in the UK and here that wearing masks works. But we also know that when you congregate in crowds, that's a setup for the spread of the infection. He says, quote, I would say in a perfect world, people shouldn't congregate in a crowd and demonstrate.
Where was he a couple weeks ago? Was Fauci out banging the drum on this?
And by the way, I mean, that's in the 15th paragraph of the Telegraph article. Talk about burying the lead.
But absolutely. But was Fauci out really banging the drums on this?
Never.
No.
Mr. President, thank God you've got Fauci off the air. I mean, it's ridiculous.
In some respects, though, let's be real. If it were not for these protests, we'd all still be probably hiding in our basements right now. And to a certain extent, these protests force the issue about opening up the country.
The law of unintended consequences. But it's also going to, if you believe the experts, it's also going to exacerbate this pandemic. Okay, we've got conservative clergy of color are going to join us. Bishop Audrey Shines and his posse. We're going to be here going through all of your questions. In fact, hashtag war and pandemic, and in the live chat on YouTube. Why don't you be giving us questions right now, inquiries that you want us to ask?